Hello and welcome to the 30 Under 30 live chat. My name is Casey Brown, 30 Under 30 alumnus, assistant coach at Boston University, and most importantly, your moderator for today's important hot topic discussion. Today's panel of 30 Under 30 participants will be discussing different topics and experiences on the health and safety of soccer players in today's game. Before we get started, let's introduce our questionnaires, our participants, our 30 Under 30 participants. First up, we have Sarah Brady.
Hi everyone, I'm Sarah Brady. I am working with Manhattan College, which is situated in the Bronx, New York. We're a Division I program. I'm the assistant coach there, loving it, it's great.
Awesome, thanks for joining us, Sarah. Next up, we have Catherine Scarbeck. Welcome, Catherine.
Hey everybody, my name's Catherine. I am working with Twin Cities Soccer Association. We're in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. Been with the club for about 8 years, and I'll be the Girls Youth Academy Director with the U8 to U10 program for the coming season.
Terrific. Thanks for joining us, Sarah and Kat. Another reminder to all our viewers out there, if you guys have a question on today's live chat, please feel free to tweet and use the hashtag NSCAA Live, and we'll be sure to try to get to your question. Let's get started. First, Kat, if you could talk to us, how have you seen the issue of player safety change in the game of soccer?
Yeah, so it's a great question. For me, working with the youngest age groups, some of the biggest things that we see are when kids are really young, they've started specializing in sports more than usual, or more than they used to. So, for example, kids, you're seeing 10-year-olds come in and their parents say, we just want our kid to focus on soccer, we want to go for that scholarship, and they're not playing basketball, they're not playing baseball, they're not doing these other things, and there have been a lot of studies done that have come out recently that show that leads to a lot of overuse injuries and also burnout of players, so that's something I've definitely noticed. Another thing that you might not think about as much is that PE programs in our schools are really dying. I know that here in our public school system in North Carolina, most of the kids that come here to our club only have PE once a week, or once every 7 days, which is less than once a week. So we see kids coming in without, at the U7, U8 age groups, not having great motor skills or coordination. So so as coaches, we've got to do a lot more teaching them to, how to balance on one foot when you're striking a ball, or how to fall properly to protect your head and your arms and things like that, so you don't end up with a broken wrist or a concussion from something that didn't need to be a bigger deal. So I think those are two of the biggest things that I'm really noticing with younger age groups, and a lot of it is just coaches kind of needing to pay a little bit more attention to what's going on outside of the club that you're working in or the youth program, and getting those kids kind of a little bit more attention on some of their motor skills.
I think that's a great point. So something maybe we've always kind of taken for granted has now been a fundamental change in maybe what you're doing on the technical side with some of your youngins. That's great. And Sarah, is there anything you want to add to that and what you've kind of seen with the change in the game of soccer and relating to player safety?
Hello. Yeah, definitely. I think one of the main things is that there's more of an awareness of injury being a real topic in the game. That's kind of not a player injury is a sign of weakness, or they just can't hack the physical demands of the game. I mean, long gone are the days of the magic sponge where the coach runs on when you go down with an injury with a wet sponge, dabs it on and says get up. So it's a real issue in the game, and unfortunately burnout's getting younger and younger, as Kat said earlier, where the incorrect techniques, the lack of physical education in school. So the more awareness of injury being a real aspect of the sport is definitely increased.
Absolutely. Thanks for sharing that, guys. I think you're definitely dead on, and I think maybe from what I've noticed, and you maybe feel the same way, there's been kind of a certain hot topics of injury that have sort of come to the forefront, which leads us into our next question here. Concussion prevention, obviously a big one. And treatment are at the forefront of athlete safety right now. What are ways you guys with your college team, Sarah on your side, also with a little bit of club, and then Kat with you in the youth and club, that you guys are kind of handling this? Sarah, do you want to take it off first?
Yeah, sure. I think the thing with concussion, if I'm being honest, I've never heard of the word until I got to the United States. I'll tell you a fun story. So I remember being a kid playing. I've gone in for a header at the back post. The defenders give me a little bit of a push, and I've completely missed the ball, and I've nutted the post, and everybody's reaction on the field, including the referees, was to just laugh. I think, you know, says a little bit more about my age than anything there, but I think the culture of concussion, you know, it's obviously a hot topic at the moment, and, you know, the research is, you know, heavily suggesting it's a real issue and there's definitely long-term effects of it. So, joking aside, it does need to be taken serious. I think that the main thing with regards to the awareness is, you know, the information out there now is very readily available. I know at Manhattan we have to go through a first aid responders course before the start of the season. We've also got athletic trainers on hand all the time. I think as a coach, it can be very easy to say, oh, please get up, you're fine, get back out there. But the athletic trainer, you know, we've got fantastic athletic trainers at Manhattan, and, you know, not only are they informed, but they take their duty of care seriously, and, you know, they're assessing a player thinking about them as a person, not necessarily the soccer player first. So it definitely helps to have that support.
Absolutely. Kat, can you speak a little bit to that as well, in terms of with your club, how that's maybe handled, particularly at the younger ages when you maybe don't have as much access to things like full-time athletic trainers, and it's more sort of the player-coach but also the parent-coach relationship?
Yeah, sure. So I think one big thing in the club part of the game is when players are with us, they're also doing activities outside of soccer. So I can think of an example where a player's been in basketball practice, and, you know, they've come in and, you know, they crashed heads with somebody in that practice, and they come to my practice. I'm like, I don't, you know, if they still have a headache, I'm not going to put them back out on the field, you know, that training session. So I think a lot of it at the younger ages is the lines of communication. So between the coach, the parent of the player, if they're very young, and then with the player themselves, kind of gauging symptoms. Some of it, you know, is more by feel when you're on the sideline if you don't have medical personnel available. And then luckily, you know, with a lot of tournaments these days, they have medical staff there. So if we're at a tournament and a player gets a head injury, I leave it up to the medical staff to let me know if that player's okay to come back on the field. So, you know, with head injuries in games, if somebody gets hit in the head and, you know, I'm not sure if it's a concussion or not, I don't play that child in the game in the second half. And, you know, if the parent is mad about it, we can talk about it, you know, after the game, and things like that. But, you know, and North Carolina Youth Soccer also has a concussion plan where if the player has to be out for a certain amount of time, and we need a doctor's note before they can come back in. So I did that with a player this year, and I got doctor's clearance, you know, after about a week and a half, and then I felt comfortable putting that kid back in. But, you know, with our staff coaches, it's definitely a liability issue for us, you know, with players and things like that. So yeah, I'm all for being on the cautious side more than anything. When I was in 8th grade, I got a concussion. Knocked out on a field, went up for a header, and the other girl headed me by mistake, I hope. So I had to be out for 3 months. I was really mad about it, and sometimes looking back, I still get mad that I had to sit out on Miss State Cup. It was felt like the worst thing ever. But, you know, now as an adult, how much of that 3 months did I really miss anything? Not too much, and it was definitely important, you know, for me academically to obviously take care of my brain. So, yeah.
Definitely. Thank you for sharing that, guys. I think definitely some great advice, particularly, Kat, with the youth, and sort of if you don't have all that formality, can you look to sort of set up your own precautionary things and sort of your own protocol, and erring on the side of caution, certainly. Any comments? I got some tweets about this, but have you guys, what are your standpoints just on the use of headgear? You know, I've heard different things in terms of the Superman effect. Are you guys seen players wear it more and more? I don't know if you have any comments. Anyone?
Yeah.
Kat?
Can I go with this one first, Kat?
Yeah, you're in.
Go ahead. You're in.
Honestly, I honestly think that correct technique in heading the ball, you know, developing neck muscles, is so much more beneficial than the headgear. I think, unfortunately, it's a massive, you know, response in marketing to the fact that, oh no, there's concussions, how can we make money out of this? I think the research is massively inconclusive, and unfortunately I don't think these brands are as strong as they are. Sorry, I don't think they're as strong with regards to the research as they are with their marketing. I think it's clever marketing. I don't necessarily agree with it. I know a couple of players who've worn them have said that they just annoy them. They just get in their way, and they feel like it takes away from the game. So I can't reiterate more the importance of good technique. You know, improving neck muscles is much better in prevention of concussions than any type of helmet or mask, whatever they wear. I don't even know what they're called.
I think to jump in here, I think the other thing with technique is also players learning how to use their body properly to protect themselves when they go up for a header. So, getting your arms out, making your base as wide as you can to protect. So if you put your arms out and a player comes in next to you, there's a very small chance that their head is going to connect with yours. And again, hitting the ball on the appropriate surface of your head. And then also, I had one more thing, but if I remember it, I'll pull it back out. But yeah, I think proper form is definitely way more important than the headgear helping. Oh, and learning how to fall properly. So many concussions happen with when players fall and they get that rebound effect to their head hitting the ground, and they might not even be involved in a header play. So learning how to fall and roll and land on your shoulder instead of landing on your head is a pretty helpful tool, I think, as well.
Yeah, definitely some interesting points there, and I know I don't know exactly where I stand. I think what you guys said is awesome in terms of technique and how, again, we as coaches can make an impact in that area. That's just terrific. Next question we're kind of looking at here. An injury obviously can not only be physically detrimental, but also mentally. How do you guys keep athletes focused and kind of on track and engaged during that whole recovery process? I know, Kat, you talked about that 3-month period that you were out. How do you kind of stay with it? And particularly concussions, it's a lot about rest. But even some other injuries, how do you guys keep them focused and going?
Yeah, so for me, I had a player this spring who's a U14, and she ended up being out for many weeks with an ankle injury. It was near the beginning of the season, so we were kind of getting everything ramped up and figuring out who would be in what position and things like that, and she was getting worried about it. So I almost turned her into an assistant coach for me for those weeks. So she helped me in games, like track where we were taking shots from, where the other team was taking shots from, kind of gave her something to do and kept her involved with the team. I really like it when kids can still come to training, and just be involved, and I think that makes them feel a part of things. You don't want them there just sitting around, but if they can help, get soccer balls to the appropriate place or maybe set up the next activity, kind of gives them a little responsibility. But on the younger side as well, we have a lot of kids that if they have a broken leg, they're and they're 10, they're not going to come out to everything. So it's a lot of it's with communication with parents, making sure you check in with kids and see how they're doing, or even if they get just an injury knock at practice one night, and just sending an email or just a text or a phone call to the parent and checking in on a kid can go really a long way in kind of maintaining the relationship with the kid and the club and the player and the team as well.
Definitely. And Sarah, if you could speak to that as well. I know certainly from the college standpoint, maybe that's a little bit different because it's sort of their full-time, they're doing an everyday type thing. So how does that affect it in the college game?
Yeah, I agree, Casey. To be honest with you, I think it's easier in the college game because the culture is they're in school, they're on campus, you're on campus, we're training every day. I just think it's more of an emotional, mental side of the game that needs the management because the athletic trainers are fantastic, as I said earlier, and they take care of the physical part of it, and they're mapping the injury, and they're giving us progress reports daily, which is fantastic. But the mental side and the emotional side, for anyone who's ever played and been injured, we know it's the worst part of football. The difficulty with our players are some of them cope differently than others. We've got players who love to come to practice and just sit there and, kind of what Kat said, you give them a task, you get them involved. We've had a player this year who was great with, not necessarily an assistant coach as such, but if anyone needed a little bit of help, they didn't want to come to us, they went to her. And it was great. But there's other players who just can't look at the field, can't be near the field. And it's just a case of knowing your players. What we tend to do a lot is, at Manhattan, is we meet with players. We always have an open door policy, but we also try and make sure that we meet with players at least fortnightly. Some players don't want to speak to you, but I think that it breaks down the barrier if you have that meeting every couple of weeks that they have to attend, because things do start to come out, and you learn a bit more about your players and how to best manage them in case of injury and in case of anything, really. So I think the key to it is understanding your players at college level, because the physical side of it is looked after by athletic trainers mainly.
Right. I think, again, great points there, and I know certainly, and I think you touched on it too, Sarah, is we want them to certainly manage their own emotions and sort of getting through that period, but also making sure they're engaged in training sessions and listening to coaching feedback so they can still progress in that area as well. Next one we're looking at here, how do you guys address the idea of playing through injuries versus sort of risking health. So you want to kind of balance the two, and I know that can sort of be a tricky balance at times. But Kat, could you speak to that first at the youth level for us?
Sure. So, I mean, with our younger players, especially, so if we're looking at that up to U10, even up to U14 for me is, if they've got some kind of serious knock that they've taken, I'm not going to risk putting them in because, I mean, if you look at all the research that's been done, soccer players peak at age 26. So if they're 11 and miss like 2 things, I'm not incredibly.
Are you telling me I just missed my peak just now, or what?
I didn't know that. Well, yeah, but so with the younger ones, I think it's just making sure you maintain open lines of communication with parents and the players, and then the other thing too is the other side of it. You don't want to coddle a player either. So if they've just gotten hit in the stomach and had the wind knocked out of them, my gut reaction is to tell them to get up and keep playing and fight through it and I think that goes a long way to helping create players who want to be involved in a game that can get a little bit physical, a little bit intense, and kind of just create that attitude of wanting to keep going. I mean, the other side of it too is I had a player last year during State Cup who wanted to go back in a game, but she had just told the player next to her that she couldn't see out the sides of her eyes because she had a concussion. So, you have to be really careful at taking players at their word, especially when they reach that high school level and get a little bit sneaky, and try to sneak in. I'm sure that's something at the college level that's important as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think that's a great segue, Sarah, over to you in the college game, and just as Kat said, right? So maybe it's a different level of pressure, particularly Division I game that we're looking at, where players, it matters that we've invested in them maybe financially. We certainly want them to do well, and they feel that pressure, or the pressure of being in season and sort of the need to be on the field. So how do you guys manage that? I know you talked a little bit about open door policy, which I think is terrific. Anything else you can speak to there?
Yeah, I think that's one of those difficult things in your player management, particularly at Manhattan. You have to drag our kids off the field. We had a kid who played 30 minutes with a broken leg, basically, and she just wouldn't come off the field. There's a stigma attached to being injured, and players want to play. But I think there's a responsibility as a coach. I'm very holistic in my approach to players where they're people first. And I think, your duty as a coach to definitely young players is you've got to be able to speak to them on the level of, look, there's no less respect for you if you're coming off this field. Your body is injured. If you're going to play through it, it's going to get worse. And I think that kind of opens the door for more honesty. But, I'll always go back to the fact that knowing your players and knowing who's hurt and who's injured, I think it becomes easier with the more experience you get with them. But as someone who suffered a lot of injuries personally in my career, I would never condone playing through injury. And sometimes you have to kind of be tougher and you have to say to them, no, you're not ready. They'll tell you they are, but we all know what our players look like when they're at their peak, and we know when they're not 100% there. And I think your observation and your perception is really tested. But it's difficult because, as I say, that individual player difference. Some of them, will walk off with a sore toe. Someone stepped on their toe, and someone will be a broken leg and be like, good, let's keep going,
Absolutely. What about, have you guys noticed, I've noticed a bit of this, have you noticed the players that kind of fall between that line, though, where it's something gets a little bit hard, maybe it's fitness, maybe it's practice, and maybe they didn't do well, and they, suddenly an old injury comes into play, and any kind of suggestion with that sort of psyche of how you push through some fitness barriers versus is that an injury? Have you guys noticed that as well, or is that just one of the things that's difficult to deal with? Any thoughts?
Yeah, I've definitely seen that. It happens a lot in the college game, to be honest with you. I think it's more of a mental management thing where players, they don't want to fail, or they don't want to be perceived as anything less than, superior, because, if you get to the Division I level, they think they have to be on all the time and, outstanding all the time. But players' bodies break down. I mean, our season is massively condensed. I'm more of a fan of the year-round schedule because I think it would lend itself, to better player recovery and better player development. But I think that's another webcast, really, isn't it? But yeah, I think, again, knowing players, knowing who is willing to push through that barrier and who is kind of taking the easy option out.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's a great segue, guys, to, how do we kind of, as coaches, right, how do we work towards that injury prevention? We talk a lot about dealing with the actual injury and sort of a player management standpoint, but is there anything that we can do as coaches to help, prevent all of that? Kat, could you speak a little bit to that, please?
Sure, yeah. So definitely with the younger ages in our programs, we don't have like a big like a FIFA 11 plus warm up that we do with our older players. So like the FIFA 11 plus I think is fantastic for older players, like probably U13, U14 and up who are playing 11v11, who are getting across a full 120-yard long pitch by 60 yards wide. To work on some ACL injury prevention and things like that. I think for the younger ones, I mean, when we do our warm-ups, it's mostly fun and getting them engaged and just kind of getting their heart rate up a little bit. And then again, with the younger ones, it's about teaching them proper technique. So, when they're ball striking, so that they don't do anything to tweak a knee, because they're still growing, massive amounts. They can't do any strength training yet, like an older player can, to help kind of, limit some injuries. So they're also they're not as likely to receive like a career-ending injury or anything like that at 11, or 10 or 11. So that's another thing that kind of comes into it too. We don't do quite as much prevention, but it's more like learning techniques, learning how to fall properly, learning proper running form, which comes into play a lot more when they get older. If they build good habits when they're young, then it's so much easier, as they move on in the game to just tweak little things and little things here and there instead of having a big issue.
Great point. And Sarah, over to you, obviously with the college game. What sort of prevention do you guys look to incorporate?
I think as a coach, and especially at college level, you're always wanting to plan everything and control everything. You can take care of a lot of the factors with just good planning. For example, how your pre-season is planned out. I'm not a big fan of two-a-days. I'd never heard of it again until I got to the US. You train once a day and you go hard. But there's a massive element of fitness in the American game. It's quite direct, quite transitional. So the fitness of players is usually quite high on the agenda. I think you can get a lot done in one session a day, and I don't necessarily think you need to go into two. I think also with the schedule being as condensed as it is, playing twice a week, it's very hard to get the right recovery time. So obviously then you're planning your macro cycles, you're getting your work and your rest and making sure you're getting your recovery in. I think the main difficulty with it, excuse me, I forgot where I was, okay, is you've got to realise that you can't control everything as a coach. You can do your best, you can have the best planning, but, a lot of the responsibility falls on a player. If we're planning a session and we say, okay, we've got 72 hours to get them back to 100% for the next game, a lot of that is depends on what they do. Do they go home? Do they rest? Are they eating correctly? Are they stressed in school? There's a lot more factors that go into it, and a lot of it is beyond the coach. So I think one of the main things that would be a benefit to any program, whether it be youth or soccer, is educate your players. I mean, we're very lucky. We have a relationship with Columbia Nutrition School, so they come in and they do a lot of our nutrition work with our players. And the nice thing is, it's quite a difficult topic sometimes to discuss with your coach, nutrition and eating habits. So they take that off us, and it's more of a professional having the conversations with the players. And I think that helps. But the more responsibility you can give your players, I think the better it's going to be.
Definitely. And I think one of the things that I like to bring up, and you guys can certainly attest to this, but sometimes you talk about what's actually in your control. Like you said, Sarah, nutrition's a big one there, and like Kat, you talked about technique and developing that. I think the other thing too sometimes is when you particularly look at high school seniors coming into the college game, or even middle school players making the jump to the high school game, sometimes fitness can be something that we can control to sort of prevent soft tissue injuries. Yeah. Because I know the tempo of a Division I season, even, it happens so fast. So if you're not fit enough, Sarah, like you said, with those two-a-days sometimes, or you can't even just keep up with the tempo, then maybe you've now pulled your quad and you're sitting out for a week or two, and now you're suddenly behind the 8-ball trying to play catch-up. So I think fitness, and now you see like the use of polar heart rate monitors and things like that, certainly provided an advantage with that as well. Good stuff, guys. We'll keep it rolling. let's talk about parents. I know the dreaded parents. Club soccer loves that, right?
Love parents, Casey. They're great.
I know you do, Sarah. All right. How informed should parents be when discussing player health and safety? Sarah, do you want to kick that off, and then Kat, we'll go to you?
Yeah, I mean, the thing with parents, I think they can be your greatest enemy or your greatest ally. I'm pretty lucky. I've got great parents, and I've never really had too many difficult parents. And I think a lot of that is just setting expectations and, you know, keeping them informed. I mean, I'm very big on sending, you know, parents articles, weekly updates, and I think the more they feel involved, the better. And the more you communicate with them, I don't know if it's necessarily true, but the perception is definitely that you care more about their kids. I mean, most people working in youth coaching, you know, they care about kids, and I think parents will know that more if it's more of a relationship, more interactive. I think that the quote from, I think it's Jefferson, you know, when people are informed, they can be trusted with their own government. You know, if people are aware and they, you know, they have the information, they're going to be on board more often than they're not. I think with regards to player safety, I think 100% parents should be involved with the youth levels, because, you know, they're young and parents can get a little bit, you know, I don't want to say too much here, but parents can get a little bit uber sensitive, let's say. That's the best way of putting it. To be honest with you, the college game, we deal less with parents, but I still think it's important to be involved with parents. You know, they're usually at every game anyway, and just showing that investment and that kind of relationship building with their child, even if that kid is 24, 23, it's still their child. So I think it's always important to have parents involved and on board.
Definitely. Kat, over to you on the club side with that dreaded parent. But what's a way you can kind of be proactive, and sort of how do you involve them in that?
Yeah, it's a super fun time for us right now because tryouts begin tonight. So yeah, it's really, really fun. You know, so I think one of the biggest things, just like Sarah said, is communicating with parents and having open lines of communication. So, you know, I try to be as approachable as possible with players. You know, and I think that's important to do with parents too, particularly with younger kids who, you know, might not know the best decision to make for themselves at, you know, at 9 years old. You know, should I play with a broken ankle or not? I'm probably but a kid might try to jump in or something. So you know, so I think with parents, just staying in touch. You know, and then also, just like Sarah said too, you know, it shows a lot of shows that the coach cares when they get in touch and when they communicate specifically. So I like to, if there's been an injury or something, communicate specifically with that family, not something out to a whole team that, you know, you just check in and, you know, see how things are going, or, you know, if it's a bad injury, a visit to the hospital or a visit to the house after, you know, an ACL surgery or something like that is definitely huge for building relationships. Because, I mean, soccer, relationships are a huge part of the game. You know, you have to get the people involved at the club level, our coaches and staff. It's players, and then it's their parents. You know, the parents are the ones getting them everywhere and paying for the experience. So, you know, we've got to make sure we do the best we can to provide the best product that we possibly can to families, and, you know, create good environments for their players.
They're the customer. I think that's absolutely right. Just so you know, the tweets are coming in hot here. I'm just trying to manage. Last area I just wanted to touch on, Kat, and I know it's something you had talked about before in discussions we've had. Just about weather. I think we talked about injuries, and I think under the umbrella of player safety, weather's a big one. You know, us lucky folks here in Boston had, you know, a good amount of snow this winter, and you talk about ice on fields, or you talk about rain as a place safe to play in, or just the softness of surface, or thunder, lightning, anything. What could you share with us there from your standpoint?
Yeah, so game days and everything, once you get to the field, I mean, the referees are in charge of that, and they, you know, and it's a big responsibility that they have, you know, with lightning, thunder, or field conditions, if things are playable or unplayable. But I also think, you know, coaches, especially if you're hosting the event, it's really important that you're on top of that as well. So an example, I went to a tournament last fall, and we got to the field, and there was a rock about the size of a paving stone that was flat, so you couldn't see it, but it's in the middle of the field, and it's just not a playable surface. You can't have a kid playing and fall and, you know, crack their head open. That's kind of an extreme example. Our parents actually ended up digging the rock out. It's like pretty big, but it filled it up with sand, and we were able to play. You know, but with weather out at our facility on any given night, we've got over 1,000 kids out on our field. So, we're always checking the weather radar if there's storms in the area, and kind of our rule of thumb is if you see lightning, if you hear thunder, like everybody's off the field. We've got a big horn that we blow and get everybody inside or up under cover as quickly as we can. Yeah, can't take any risks.
Sarah, anything from your standpoint?
I think the main thing in the college game, I could say, is the turf versus grass issue. We play on turf at Manhattan, and many of our conference mostly play on turf, but it's funny, when we play on grass, there's a lot more injuries because we're just not used to it. So I think management of players playing on both surfaces expose them to both. I know it's quite difficult logistically sometimes. We're right in the middle of New York City, not a lot of grass soccer fields. But if you can kind of get your players exposed and experienced on the different surfaces, then the transition between them is a lot easier.
Definitely. Well, guys, that's unfortunately all the time we have for today. It was great to get some questions from our viewers today. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. And thanks so much to Sarah and Kat. Just before we go, a couple notes. Reminder that applications for the 2015 class of 30 under 30 actually open June 1st. We'd love to have a bunch of applications for that. Also, be sure to check out the NSCA Summer Series. There's a trio of educational events being held this summer both in the U.S. and Canada, World Cup. Registration is now open for the high school workshop and showcase and the 3rd annual NSCA Summer Symposium. Just visit us at nscaa.com/summer series for more information. Thanks again for tuning in, and we'll see you guys next time at our live 30 under 30 chat. Sarah, Kat, thanks so much.
See ya.
Thank you.